So maybe you could also tell us how the party has changed over the last several years, and what you think it needs to do to be in a position to seek power again.
Yes, I am the only repeat offender. It puts an interesting perspective on it, because in 2006, and I'm a Liberal. I'm not the biggest fan of the Harper government. I should come as no surprise. But in 2006, we'd elected a Harper government, and a lot of us as Liberals were worried about what that meant. I mean, we'd heard things said when he was head of the National Citizens Coalition. We'd heard things said in the campaign, so we were a little concerned about what we might see. But we, of course, were in our own leadership contest. And we had a great group of candidates, and we were all saying things about what we needed to do as a party to rebuild the party, what we needed to do for the country. And fast forward 7 years, and we've now had 7 years of local government. We now know that a lot of the things that we were concerned about, and some we didn't even think about, have happened, and so we have additional concerns now as a party. But here we are again in another leadership contest, and we have another group of candidates all saying really important things about what we need to do as a party, what we need to do for the country. The only challenge is that as Liberals, we've only managed to lose 2 more elections. And so it's clear to me that as a party, we can't keep saying the same things and hope that our fortunes will change.
Now, have you seen kind of emerging among a very disparate group of candidates with all their own ideas, but through the course of the campaign, a bit of a consensus of what the 21st century Liberal Party looks like?
Not yet.
No?
No, because we haven't had it. Quite honestly, there's been very little discussion about. I mean, that you have a policy proposal here, you have a policy proposal there, but I still haven't seen what I would see as a real, where we take the country. And one of the challenges that I have, and that I had as a Liberal, was that by 2011, I had, don't get me wrong, you pick any 20 policy issues and I can tell you where I stand and where I have stood for years and where, I've evolved. But I can't say that for the party. There have been quite a few things where we've said, this is where we stand, but we've voted in a different way. Crime bills being a perfect example. Things that we've stood for, but we haven't been able to really do anything about. Long-form census, we all knew it was a bad thing to get rid of, but we weren't in a position to bring down the government over it. At the same time, recognizing that the NDP were very clear on where they stood. That was a bit of a luxury, being in their position at the time, to be able to say this is where we stand, this is where we stand, just given the electoral situation. But I found that over the years of being pushed back on our heels repeatedly with the attack ads against Stefan, the attack ads against Michael, that what I saw happening was a party that was increasingly trying to be everything to everybody.
You referred to the attacks against Dion and Ignatia, and we might as well talk about this now because it was on the weekend. Your comments about Justin Trudeau, and now you've kind of apologized and clarified those statements regarding kind of his privileged upbringing, right? But can you kind of explain? But you've also retained certain concerns about that, and I wonder if you can explain to us kind of the difference between your concerns about his kind of privilege and other attacks, kind of anti-elitist attacks. And I remember Ignatia was a dilettante and Dion was an egghead, and that did quite a bit of damage to their prospects, right?
I'm really glad you asked the question, because in fact I have no criticism, Justin, for his upbringing. I have none whatsoever. Okay. And unfortunately that was what I ended up apologizing for, because I would never criticize somebody for their upbringing. It is not something that's beyond somebody's control. What family you're born into, what circumstances you're born into, the privilege you're born into is something beyond your control, and I would never criticize that. What I will continue, and it came, obviously, it came out the way it came out, and that was why I apologize, because what I intend to do and continue to do is to be plenty focused on what one does with one's life. How one is born and the privilege one is given is not at all the issue. The question is what you do with it. The question is what you do with everything that you have, the challenges you face, how you deal with those challenges, what you do with your life in terms of what you learn, the experiences you go through. That is actually really important. And I mean, I've been running a campaign saying the Liberal Party doesn't have, I don't think there are any chances left in the bucket. This is a really, really big decision for the party. And it is absolutely, in my mind, a question of substance and experience. That's not how one was born. That's what one does with one's life.
Fair enough. You know, would you say he doesn't deserve his kind of perceived front runner, even almost fait accompli status as in the campaign?
You won't mind if I take exception to the fait accompli?
No, I expect you would.
Well, you know, it's nothing personal, but it's also not about celebrity. It can't be about celebrity. And fame is fickle. And with the seriousness of the decision facing the Liberal Party right now, a decision based on something like that could be the party has to make a decision based on much more substantial and much more fundamental questions than celebrity. There is no such thing as a silver bullet. We actually tried to do that. I think there was a sense of Michael Ignatieff being a silver bullet. And I have huge respect for Michael, huge respect for Stefan. But if you don't have that experience, that political experience, the economic experience, the business experience, it showed. That's what we need now. And I use as my example over and over and over again, Frank McKenna and the New Brunswick Liberals in 1985. The Liberal Party in New Brunswick was not doing particularly well. They elected a leader who, you know, I'm sure he won't take this personally either, but not exactly flashy, right? But incredibly solid, incredible substance, terrific experience, and a leader who then took a team and spent 2 years going community after community in New Brunswick. I mean, it was a hell of a lot of hard work, but that is a perfect example of the choice, and I'm assuming you knew, but then by 1987 they won a sweep, right? They won every single seat. Hatfield helped in the last little bit. You know, what, Paul and the Queen's blame. But there's no question that that success was due in large measure to who they chose as the leader, the type of leader that they chose, and what that person did with the team for the following 2 years. In my view, that's exactly what the Liberal Party of Canada has to do.
Are you the Frank McKenna in this scenario?
It would be presumptuous of me to suggest that. All I'm saying is that I'm stressing the importance of having a leader who has substance and experience, yes.
So can I just go back to make sure I'm clear on what your criticism of Justin Trudeau is based on what he's done with his upbringing, you know, what he's done with his life?
Has nothing to do with his upbringing.
No.
So let me be clear.
Yeah.
It has absolutely nothing to do with his upbringing or his privilege. It came out as a context of, my concerns were about the language of middle class, upper class, lower class. I find those to be, the economists, so I use them. I've done enough academic work in that regard to know that. But just as a Canadian, I find terminology is really important, and I find that language carries with it judgmental connotations of social standing that I would prefer we didn't use. And the challenge is that as soon as you use that kind of language, then you are therefore implying upper class, lower class, right?
And you wouldn't consider yourself to be a member of the middle class then either, right?
Well, given that I don't like the term, I wouldn't consider that. I have never used the word ordinary Canadian either.
Yeah, well, given what I think most people consider middle class to mean, like I would imagine you do quite well for yourself would be in the
middle income.
top 5 or 2
middle income, lower income.
Sure.
We can talk about questions of income disparity.
Right.
I actually was, I was really fortunate when I was born. My dad had been a pretty successful businessman, and we were, it was pretty affluent. I was born into a pretty affluent opportunity. I mean, I went to the Toronto French School. I ski raced. Those are not things that come cheaply, right? I was raised in a family of 6 kids where education was hugely important, and we were offered the opportunities to get good education. That's fantastic. Then when I was about 12, my parents split up and things kind of changed. And I'd grown up in Toronto for that first dozen years. By the time I was 13, my mom and the 3 youngest kids moved north because, as she said, we can stay in Toronto and we can't ski anymore, or we can move up north. So we moved to a little town called Thornbury, so that we could continue skiing, and which was a great thing for her, for us. You know, she saw this as a great thing for the kids to be able to do. You're not hanging out at the mall for the weekend, right? And it was a fantastic experience for me because, you know, I'd been born in the city, and all of a sudden the 3 youngest of the kids, of which I'm 5, so number 4, 5, and 6, we're up there in a small town with my mom going, oh God, what just happened? And living the second half of my growing up in rural Ontario was fantastic. We lived on an orchard. And all my friends were farmers, and you know, like, they won't be even remotely interested in it, but it's kind of a fun anecdote. In grade 13 biology, you know, we were dissecting a fetal pig until the day that I went on the school bus, because I had to go to high school in Meaford, which was 10 miles down the road, because Thornbury's not big enough for a high school. And the catchment area for the high school in Meaford's really big, so it's all farmland, and one of my best friends was way inland, and the bus went to her place, to her farm, and she got on and sat down, a big garbage bag at her feet, and I said, Liz, what the hell's in the bag? She said, well, it's the calf that didn't make it last night. I thought that would be way more interesting than that stupid little fetal pig. So my grade 13 biology, we got to dissect a calf, which was actually really interesting. But that actually, to me, is really neat, because I did start off with privilege and am so grateful for that. And by the time I had to go to school, I had to make my way, right? So I worked waiting on tables, I worked in construction, I worked at a variety of things. The fact that by the time I was 26, I had 2 degrees and I had 3 kids, and I had a pretty significant chunk of student debt. Knowing about student debt is actually a pretty important experience for a Canadian right now, both for parents and for students. And knowing what it means to pay stuff off, and knowing what it means to actually, you know, appreciate the fact that if we didn't have a robust student loan and grant system in this country, I wouldn't be sitting here with you.
Yeah, we've done reasonably well since then.
Well, thank heavens for a work ethic that was instilled in me by my parents. Yeah. Great siblings. Great extended family, and yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, when you go to
your finances the way Trudeau did.
Trust me, there ain't any trust funds.
No, it's not that interesting.
No, I'm happy to answer any questions. Sure.
Will you say?
But I will point out that if the situation that I'm in now is, I wouldn't have been able to go to university and law school without student loans and grants. For that, I'm very grateful. But once you become a lawyer, and you know, I hadn't even planned on practicing law. I had more academic aspirations, but gotta tell you, that offer of a job on Bay Street was pretty attractive when you had a chunk of student debt at the end of school. Ended up loving practicing, and ended up being you know, practicing law and then moving into the corporate world as a senior executive. But all those experiences also helped me in my decision to set up my own business when I did, and run a successful business.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right.
Not to prolong the discussion about Mr. Trudeau, but will you say directly and concretely, in your own words, that you think Mr. Trudeau is simply too inexperienced and lacks the substance to be the leader of the Liberal Party and a potential Prime Minister?
I'm pretty sure I've been saying that by implication all the way along.
I'd like to hear a direct statement.
I wouldn't be running if I felt that Justin, and we're friends, I have all sorts of respect for Justin. The celebrity he brings to the party is fantastic. There's no question, the attention that's being paid is great. But I would not be running for leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada if I felt that he had enough experience and substance to be leader of the party and Prime Minister.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
perhaps we should move to the issues, because one that I think is of particular interest around here, and with this editorial board in this area, is supply management. It's kind of staked out as your issue, and I knew you'd know we'd ask about it. How do now? A lot of Liberals around here are no doubt big fans of it. There are a lot of rural communities that support it strongly. So what do you tell them when they say, look, if you're a leader, I'll never have a chance of winning in my riding because of that one issue? Or do you think that's true?
Well, every riding in this country that has dairy farms has at least twice, often a much larger multiple of non-supply managed farms. Given that dairy, poultry and egg farmers make up 1/15 of all of Canadian farmers, of the remaining 93%, 90% grow and produce things like beef, pork, pulses, grains and oilseeds, all of which would benefit from increased trade. All of which in particular would benefit from increased Asian Pacific trade, because those are the big emerging economies. Millions of people who want more than rice in their diet now. Oh, let me think, that would include things like beef, pork, grains, pulses. There are huge opportunities internationally for the majority of Canadian farmers. Every single riding in this country that has dairy farmers, has at least twice as many non-supply managed farmers who would benefit from increased trade. I've had corn farmers, I've had pork farmers from all across the country saying, good on you, thank you for doing this. There is I just gave Wayne Easter, he'd written me a letter, I just written him back with a list of all of the organizations, all of the individuals, all of the newspapers, all of the trade experts, all of the people who have said this is the time for it to go. That includes consumer groups, poverty groups, and includes all sorts of trade people. Like, it is overwhelming. And the only reason I did this last year, well, probably because I had the time, but I was asked to become an executive fellow at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. Jack Mintz called and, at least had the grace to first say, sorry about the election. But then right away said, do you want to come and do something with us? Because we'd love to have you here, which is great. I have a lot of respect for Jack. And when asked what did I want to sink my teeth into in terms of research, and I said, well, as a matter of fact, there's one issue that really drives me crazy, and that is supply management. Those of us who've been involved in business, economics, trade, we've known this to be in particular trade irritant for a long time. Yes, of course we sign trade agreements. We're about to sign one with Europe. But every time we do, we give something else up. Every trade agreement we sign, even if we've signed it, we've given something else up because it affects our leverage. Even with Europe, with agricultural subsidies, we're doing a trade-off. I don't know how public it is, but it looks to me like we're going to do a trade-off milk and beef. But if we didn't have supply management, we'd have greater level of leverage in talking about patent drugs. Like, welcome to trade negotiations, right?